in my administration as governor. First and foremost is, and this is very basic, and I'm shocked that this needs to be said, but given the last 4 years it does. We're actually going to include educators in decision-making and policy formulation. What a radical idea, to actually include people that are in the classroom on a daily basis instead of blaming them for all of our problems. That's number one. Number two, we need to focus more on investing and less on testing. You know, our school funding system was found to be unconstitutional in 1997. It still is. It still is. It was unconstitutional because the state was walking away from their responsibilities to help fund education in local schools through centralized state funding, and that situation has gotten worse. They've taken the 12% out of every new property tax levy. They took $2 billion out of education. They put $1.5 billion back, but a lot of that is going to failing charter schools. So the situation is more dire than it's ever been. And I read a newspaper article today that part of Governor Kasich's education policies include spending more money on education. That's news to me. If you take $2 billion out and you put $1.5 billion in, I think that's a net cut of $500 million. And that doesn't count all the wasted money on all the consultants and all the charter schools that are some of the worst performing schools in this state. So we are not investing the way that we need to. Third, we've got to acknowledge that this race to privatize our public education system is a race to the bottom. The only people that it is working for are some wealthy for-profit CEOs that are profiting off of this system. We've got to have a child-centered public education system and stop this race towards privatization. Fourth, and I mentioned this earlier, but I want to underline it. Fourth is we've got to end once and for all this completely counterproductive and unhealthy obsession with high-stakes standardized testing. It's bad for students. It's bad for teachers. You have things like the third grade reading guarantee. And the consequences of that, I have said before and I'll say it again, are going to be disastrous. And the writing is already on the wall that that's the way it's going to unfold. The governor ought to step up, and I'm calling on him to do it today. He ought to declare today a moratorium on the consequences of the third grade reading guarantee. He ought to do it right now. Because you don't fix education by just drawing a line in the sand and saying everybody's going to be at grade level because we said so. And when the governor was asked about this the other day, he said, well, they couldn't back down on the third grade reading guarantee because it was not acceptable to have kids drop out of school. Well, if you want kids to drop out of school, I'll tell you what you do. You underfund your schools in the first place, you demoralize your teachers, you create high-stakes testing that half of them aren't going to pass, and then you take all of the fun and the joy and the passion out of learning. That's why kids drop out. Now, and fifth, and related to that, we need to support a curriculum in a positive way that addresses the development of the whole child. And that cannot just be reflected on a test. So that includes things like art and music and foreign languages and other things that aren't ever going to show up on a standardized test, because children learn in different ways, and teachers should be allowed to teach in different ways. And to try to create this cookie-cutter system where you say, this is where you're going, and this is the only... a teacher told this to me. I was in Zanesville the other day, speaking with some teachers. And they said, what's so wrong about the approach that the state is taking is, they're saying, this is where you're going to go, and this is how you're going to get there, and it's the only way you can get there. Ignoring everything we've learned about education, that people learn in different ways and at different paces and in different stages. And again, that's what happens when you have education policies that are designed and implemented by corporate consultants instead of people that are in the classroom. So it all comes back to that. Sixth, there are states in this country that are doing dramatic things when it comes to early childhood education. And we're doing that in my county. One of the things I'm proud of is we made government more efficient and more effective in Cuyahoga County, but we didn't take the proceeds and then turn it into a tax cut for people that didn't need it. We put it into things like expanded universal pre-kindergarten and other forms of early childhood education, and the state of Ohio should do the same thing. And that's not a Democratic issue or a Republican issue. There are Republican states with Republican governors and Republican legislatures that are doing that because they know that you get anywhere from as high in some studies as a 17-to-1 return on your investment when you invest in early childhood education. And if you talk to teachers like I have, and you ask them, okay, we know what the problems are, but what works? They'll tell you over and over again, we can tell the children that we see in 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade that had access to early childhood education and which ones didn't. We have a state right now where there's kids starting the 1st grade that have a 500-word vocabulary. And there's kids that are starting the 1st grade with a 5,000-word vocabulary. And that gap is so extreme that our school system will constantly be having to put so many resources just to try to get that child up to grade level. And wouldn't it have been a better decision by Governor Kasich, instead of saying 3rd grade is going to be this arbitrary cutoff, what if he'd said we're going to put those resources into early childhood education? Wouldn't that have worked a lot better?